With the release of Black Adam, there are now a total of 12 movies in the DCEU. So in this video, we'll be ranking them from the worst to the best. Welcome back, DC fans. Black Adam finally makes his DCEU debut with a brand new group of heroes, an expansion on the Shazam mythology, and hope for this cinematic universe. So today, we'll be ranking all 12 DCEU movies from the worst to the best. And like with any list, this is just my list. There's no such thing as a right list. So I need you to start the conversation with yours in the comments below. Rank all 12 DCU movies according to your opinion, or just give me your top 5, top 3, whatever you prefer. And without any further ado, let's get started. 2016's Suicide Squad easily comes in last place at number 12. This is just an overstuffed mess of a movie that doesn't know what to do with its million pieces. It's a 2-hour-long music video where the needle drops instead of the narrative command where it flows and leads into. And it's just so contrived in the way it moves around, in the way it brings characters to the spotlight and in and out and changes motivations. WB only gave David Ayer 2 or 3 weeks to write the script. That is not how long you give a filmmaker to write a script. And on top of that, they kept on rewriting, they kept on reshooting, and they eventually gave the movie to a trailer company to edit and chop to pieces. And that's exactly what they did, because a movie does not flow like a trailer, but 2016's Suicide Squad does. It just presents these characters as PowerPoint presentations and then gives them a bunch of catchphrases that are supposed to make us endeared to them. And it does not work whatsoever. The action looks ugly, the cinematography inconsistent, the tone is all over the place, and the characterizations are extremely ill-defined. And on top of it all, it gave us possibly the worst Joker we have ever seen on screen. This just didn't come together whatsoever. The blame is entirely on the studio, but I don't think the inherent product we were going to get from David Ayer that objectifies Harley Quinn and gives her no progression, no evolution, and essentially every character is like that wouldn't have been any better. This was doomed from the start. Birds of Prey comes in at number 11, and this is one of at least 2 unpopular opinions in this video. This movie just didn't work for me outside its very colorful cinematography, the fun tone, the energized pace that it has to it, the wonderful cinematography, and a fantastic choreography in the action sequences. Harley Quinn is my favorite female comic book character of all time. Margot Robbie is my favorite actress working today. I really wanted to like this, but it's just so inconsistent in its storytelling, where it keeps doing the same thing over and over again to get to its point. It shows us something, and then it has characters spelling out all the information that we just saw come to life through words, very unnecessarily so. The villain in this film, while very well cast in Ewan McGregor, is absolutely lame, and that's essentially my biggest problem in this film. It's the characters. Everything is candy colored and it looks wonderful. It's vibrant, it's alive, it has a personality, but then doesn't do anything with its interesting characters. All of them very well cast. It spends so much time trying to slowly bring all the pieces together that it feels like the film doesn't really get going until the end of the second act. Again, I really like the action. I think the climax of this film really works, but besides all that, when trying to bring all these pieces together, it doesn't really focus enough on any singular of its pieces. It wants to be a Birds of Prey movie, they're only together at the end of the second act. It wants to be a Harley Quinn movie, it's too busy handling all the Birds of Prey coming together and trying to justify how to bring them together as the movie unfolds. I just want a Harley Quinn movie or a Birds of Prey movie. The two together clearly do not work. 2017's Justice League kicks us off into our top 10, and this is not a good movie. At the very least, it's a movie that has aged very poorly because all of the information that came out eventually, now that we have the Snyder Cut, which we will talk about later on this video, this is a film that essentially was not directed by anyone. It was reshot with the exact same scenes that Zack Snyder had in mind, maybe small new pieces of dialogue, new colors added in post-production, but this is a film that had Joss Whedon tied up by WB to just have someone do the job of chopping all of Zack Snyder's ideas from 4 hours into 2 hours. So again, we have another Frankenstein example of a movie coming together, but this still had the inherent good ideas of Zack Snyder. This still has that same skeleton. The basic concepts that were there from the beginning when the original director and screenwriter was bringing this movie to life, they are still in there. They are very butchered. They are much, much worse versions of what Snyder inherently had in mind originally, but you can still see the shades of his work. You can still see the echoes of his original intentions. Again, that's not the only problem we have here. Because they kept on reshooting, because they kept on rewriting, on what to add here and a little spice there, then a lot of other problems come to the surface. Essentially, every scene with Superman, with Henry Cavill, where they had to CG delete his mustache that he was wearing, that he had grown for the Mission Impossible movies. It is such a shame because it's so distracting, and every moment with Superman in this film is supposed to be the emotional crescendo of it. Essentially, the most they changed in here from Snyder's original version was that third act, was all the moments when Superman comes in, where it plays out so differently. Because up until then, it's essentially the same thing. But it becomes so distracting when you're supposed to be swept up in the emotion of the moment, feeling that sense of victory, that our heroes have a chance, and you're just looking at Henry Cavill not having a top lip. And it just doesn't work. And unfortunately, that's not the only visual effect that does not work in this film. Steppenwolf looks awful. It's a cool model, but the CG and the compositing and adding him on to the actual movie just doesn't work. Every action sequence, every sequence in the entire film, again, from Snyder's original version, is just chopped up to half of what it was. And so it doesn't play out to the supposed magnitude that it should. It doesn't carry the narrative weight that it should in that original version. So everything about this film, even though you can see the promise in the concepts, just plays out as a much worse version than what we eventually, 4 years later, got. At number 9, we have Shazam, and this is another unpopular opinion I have when it comes to the DCEU. I really wanted to love this film. I'm a fan of Shazam in the comics. I love his relationship with Superman. I love David F. Sandberg as a director. Lights Out is an incredible horror movie, and he saved the Annabelle franchise for a while. I think the horror sensibilities that he brings in here with the 7 deadly sins and trying to open the door to the magics and all that, that works. Those are momentary examples of what this film could have delivered. For those that have followed me for a while as well, you know I'm very much a superhero guy. Superheroes are my life, essentially. That's what I love to talk about on this channel. That's what gets me hyped. That's all I grew up on, was comic books, was superheroes. And I just didn't care about the superhero aspect of Shazam. I just found it very lame. It's all played very lightly, as if there's no consequences from this power. However, I don't think this is a bad movie. This sits quite a bit high above everything else we've talked about on this list thus far. This is a solid movie, but to me, it's not a good superhero movie. Everything that works about this for me is the family aspect, is the fact that Billy was abandoned by his mother, and he goes on this journey of self-discovery where he's closed himself out to the world because he's felt constantly abandoned by his birth mother, by all the foster families before, and now he's not willing to trust others. There's a great arc in there that connects to the superhero side of things where he decides to share his power and they all become the Shazam family. But that side of things, again, I didn't really care too much about. I wasn't really invested in it. It has cool visuals, it has fun action sequences, but again, it's fun. It's energetic. It's very light. Everything about the family aspect really spoke to me. I was really enjoying the drama that comes with it. I was really enjoying the comedy that comes with it. So I just really hope Shazam Fury of the Gods has something new to offer. This is a good enough family movie for me. I just don't care for it as a superhero movie, and particularly as a part of the DCEU. That's just not how I like to see my heroes treated. Wonder Woman 1984 is our number 8, a movie that doubled down on everything the original Wonder Woman did as a callback to the OG superhero movies in Superman. The sequel doubles down on all those sensibilities when it comes to its characters, its narrative, all its concepts, and dealing with magic and adventure. There's an innocent Indiana Jones sort of vibe to how the adventure plays out, but with all the theatricals of superheroics. I really love Maxwell Lord in this film. To me, Pedro Pascal nails this performance, and this is the most consistently written character throughout the film itself. I love the concepts that Patty Jenkins tackles through this. I think the execution is very inconsistent, however. The cinematography is beautiful. I think the action sequences still work brilliantly. They are just as good, if not better, than in the original Wonder Woman. However, the story just has a ton of holes in logic. Not real-world logic, really the logic that the film itself sets up when it comes to the Wishing Stone, and the rules that are broken consistently throughout this film, and the sudden powers that all these characters suddenly gain because it's convenient for the plot, because the story needs to play out in a certain way, and they don't find necessary excuses to have the film head on those directions. And so it just becomes frustrating, because the ideas are interesting, the concepts are promising, they land, emotionally speaking, to the arcs that these characters are going through. But then Wonder Woman uses the lasso of truth, and that somehow tells people to let go, and bringing Steve Rogers back, but they don't bring him back, they put him in someone else's body. Wonder Woman essentially rapes a guy in this film, because that's how they decided to go about it. And in the logic of the film, it makes no sense. It makes no sense. There are so many little things in this film that make no sense. And because there's so many little things, they all start to accumulate. And suddenly, many little things are just one giant pile of logical inconsistencies when it comes to the script of this film. So it's one that had promise, but it didn't stack up to the original. And speaking of the original Wonder Woman movie, it comes in at number 7. Like I said, it's a callback to the OG Superman movies, but Patty Jenkins adds a modern world complexity to it. When it comes to the setting, there's a necessary darkness included in this story, and we follow Wonder Woman in this fish out of water story where it deals with a really nice blossoming romance, really the best romance in the DCEU so far. And on top of that, we follow Diana through her journey where she's going to suffer an enormous paradigm shift, where Her entire concepts of what is good, what is bad, how does good and evil work, her entire nature, everything that she thought the world was and how it worked is going to get destroyed, is going to get crumbled to the ground. And still, through witnessing how her beliefs crumble to the ground, she still holds true to them. How she will protect good people, how she will fight for love, because it's everything she learns in this journey. Not just the love of family members, not just the love of those who have been there for us. She learns to fight for love and believing in the good in people, even if they don't show it. So it's a really powerful story thematically, and it really works, honestly, because Gal Gadot at this time wasn't really the strongest, most nuanced performer. It really works in the favor of the character and the journey she is going through. However, the film still has problems. We're going to talk about another movie that has very similar problems later on this list, but the third act is just a mess. I love the inherent presence of Ares, where they build him up from the beginning. You just know at any point he is going to show up. And I like David Thewlis a lot, but you need a character so enormous as Ares that plays such a pivotal part in the film to be present more, to not just be a secret villain at the end. I like the whole twist of her being the weapon of the gods, and that's when we find Diana holding true to her beliefs. She's not a weapon, a tool to be used. She has her own creed. She has her own heart that she will follow. But it's just frustrating with a movie that is so powerful, honestly, in the way it plays out thematically, and then it just crumbles to the ground in a third act that doesn't really serve the story. The rest of the film was right up here until the third act, and then it just nosedives drastically once that final battle comes up. Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice sits just outside our top 5, and in case you're wondering whether I'm counting the theatrical version or the Ultimate Edition for this ranking, both sit right at number 6. I prefer the Ultimate Edition, but I never thought it was a drastic improvement on it. What I love most about this film is Ben Affleck as this dark, world-weary, tired of the world, and sick of everyone's shit Batman. And then Henry Cavill, he's just the greatest Superman of all time for me. And from the very beginning, for all the film's faults, and it does have faults, you have this focus on the immovable object being pitted against the indestructible force. And everything in the narrative, with all its faults and all its qualities, serves that purpose. It gives weight to the directions that these characters are heading into. I do think the film gets quite busy as it goes along, and eventually, where it's pitting these two against each other, eventually loses track on that to have a tacked on third act against Doomsday, where Wonder Woman also comes in. And I feel Wonder Woman could have served a better purpose in this film, where she didn't need to just be there for the third act. She could have served as the embodiment of the other side, of the people who see him as a savior. She could have seen that as well and confront Batman about that. And this could be like a three-way dance where eventually she would come to try and step in between them to stop them. When it comes to the action, this is Zack Snyder action. It's absolutely fantastic. Snyder just doesn't fail at treating these characters as mythological beings, and you feel that in the action. The warehouse scene will go down in history as one of the best action set pieces in comic book movie history. And the Martha moment is not that bad. I don't think it gets played out to full success, but the very concept of Batman, Bruce Wayne, being confronted with the memory of his mother when he's about to kill someone else's child, that's powerful. Again, I think the concept is much better than the execution, but I never did mind where they went with it because I could see the original intent. And I think that's what works best. I also think Superman's death could have worked better. if these would have been 2 movies, because again, it feels tacked on. It makes sense within the context of that third act in isolation, but the third act feels tacked on onto this film. This should have been 2 movies. The first one where they eventually come to peace, and the second one they try together, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, to stop Lex Luthor. So it's a film that becomes more inconsistent as it goes along, but as a whole, I really enjoy this. Always have. Black Adam kicks us off into our top 5, brings back that sense of grand scoping mythological storytelling that was so ever present and inherent with Zack Snyder, who was essentially the shepherd of the DCEU from the beginning. This is how I love seeing these godlike beings being treated. I love the expansion that we see in this film of the Shazam mythology. It feels exactly like that, a mythology. It's not played for laughs, it feels grand, it feels grandiose, it feels like a dangerous power that could fall into the wrong hands and destroy the world, and we see that play out in this film. The Rock just brings his flair for the theatrics, his natural charisma, and all his pomp and circumstance that he had as a wrestler, and he brings it onto the screen as an all-powerful superhero. He is so intimidating in this, but he still carries that endearing charm and charisma that we all love so much about him. On top of that, we are presented to the Justice Society with Hawkman, Atom Smasher, Cyclone, and Dr. Fate, and this gives way for some fantastic action sequences. I love throughout the bulk of the film is just a fight between this group of heroes that we understand how powerful they are against Black Adam, and he manages to outdo all of them. The film's focus is wisely on this discussion of power and morality, captured with the bickering between Hawkman, who sees himself as a righteous hero who has to stop this dude, Black Adam, who keeps on killing people. He is not a champion of Kandak, as all people in the country see him, to free them from their oppressors. But this is not a good dude. He has a crisis of consciousness, he clearly has a moral compass, but he's not here to play by the pre-established rules, even less by the rules imposed by this brand new team of heroes. So when the film focuses on that is when it works best. And then it has the Wonder Woman problem, where on the third act, it brings in this guy who was in the background in the whole film, and suddenly he's the big threat. We get Sabak being brought into the film, and I love the twisting around of the Shazam mythology. There's a dark, twisted mirror image to the Council of Wizards and the Shazam powers. There are the Sabak powers. But the film doesn't focus enough on that. It doesn't build enough on that. It's just a sudden thing that, oh, I see how they correlate. Up until the third act, this film is an absolute blast with some of the best action sequences of the DCEU, but it carries a ton of other issues. It can feel very superficial. So on the third act, it crumbles a little bit because it has the same Wonder Woman problem. It feels more inconsistent. It doesn't dip as much. This is just a film that is very geared towards me. It knows what it is, it plays to its strength, and it does that, for the most part, to great success. Aquaman comes in at number 4, and I would actually categorize the first Wonder Woman, Black Adam, and Aquaman around the same area. Mythological heroes brought down into the world of man with gigantic scoping action sequences, a great mythology built in and around them. But where the other two falter in the third act, Aquaman delivers one of the most satisfying, insane, and visually awe-inspiring third act action sequences in the entire cinematic universe. The third act of this film is fucking insane, an all-out war between all the creatures of the sea. But while it does that, it never distracts from Arthur's journey of accepting himself not as worthy to be king, but because of the man he is, he needs to sit on that throne. Not for himself, but for all the peoples of the sea and of the surface land. This one just keeps on kicking into higher and higher gear as it unfolds. It has that sense of escalation, and James Wan brings a little bit of his horror sensibilities with the trench sequence. We discover so much about Atlantis and all the deeper mythology with all these secret and hidden kingdoms when they dive deeper down. Jason Momoa, much like The Rock, is just charisma wearing a human suit. The visuals in this are fantastic. The underwater sequences are breathtaking, and they actually look like underwater, and most of the film plays underwater. Aquaman feels very much like anime, the movie. It keeps on getting more and more insane as it unfolds, and it goes all out, unashamedly, and I am here for it. Quick, before we dive into my top 3, don't forget to let me know your ranking of all 12 DCEU movies in the comments. There's a list of all the movies in the description, as well as my reviews for all of these films. If you want to see more Black Adam videos, I have currently a mid-credit scene breakdown and a spoiler-free review on my channel, as well as reviews for all the DCEU movies. So if you're enjoying this ranking, if you want to see more DCEU videos, or if you just love movies and TV, this is the place to be. So consider clicking that subscribe button, and you won't miss any future conversations in your favorite movies and TV. Zack Snyder's Justice League comes in at number 3 after years of pleading, after years of petitioning, after years of Zack Snyder himself calling out WB, the old regime at least. They finally caved in. They gave him $70 million to finish a very unfinished product, and came to a compromise of putting it on HBO Max to deliver this 4-hour epic, this modern mythology tale of seeing all these heroes come together for a grand mission where you actually feel the weight of consequences, where you finally have a flow to the narrative, where you allow all these characters to be fleshed out, and what a difference those 2 hours make. Cyborg, who essentially was expendable from ever playing an important part or a part at all in that 2017 Justice League movie, he is so much the emotional heart of this film. The entire narrative depends so much on his presence. Ben Affleck's Batman has never been better. He's carrying all this guilt and remorse over what he did to Superman. He blames himself, and so not only is he willing to die for this cause, he needs to gather people who are better than him. All the action sequences feel grand and epic, and that's so much of what Zack Snyder brings on to this film, where you feel the weight of it all. You feel the weight of all the story, all the consequences that can come to it, and you feel so much that these are larger than life characters. And on top of that, the return of Superman.
The dark side. Not impressed.
I don't think Zack Snyder was ever subtle with his treatment of Superman as a Christ-like figure, but he never intended to be subtle. He never needed to be subtle in this context. So when we have him returning, he picks the black suit, and he has all the best scenes in this film. And so when it comes to that entire third act, you feel all the emotional gratification because you spent 3 hours with these characters trying to desperately bring Superman back, and you understand why they needed him, because Steppenwolf in this film is a fucking menace. He looks terrifying, and he looks amazing from a visual effects point of view, and you see him as a threat. He managed to outdo the entire Justice League through the bulk of this movie, and so Superman feels like a necessary piece of the puzzle to defeat him. And so when they all come together after working through their issues, it feels emotionally fulfilling. So they're now ready to take on that bigger threat in Darkseid, and the film sets up something for the future that we'll never see. I think that nightmare sequence is very tacked on, much like what we had at the end of Batman v Superman. But everything until that last morsel of insignificance, this is that for the modern day, where the MCU had their endgame, despite all the setbacks, despite everything holding him back, Zack Snyder managed to finish his trilogy in great style. The Suicide Squad from James Gunn is our runner-up. He manages to pick and choose all the characters that had promise in that original one, and he injects all his style, personality, vibrancy, and insane energy into every single person in this film. The unshackled James Gunn, irreverent, rated R humor is all here, and not all of it is really through jokes or puns or verbal jabs that characters take at each other. There's a lot of that, particularly between Deadshot and Peacemaker, and it really works. But a ton of the James Gunn humor is unleashed in the violence, and he delivers so many laughs with the violence on screen, not just because of how bloody and gory it is. There's so much carnage candy in this film that just puts a sick, twisted smile on your face. But then you have characters who, slowly as the film unfolds, get unmasked as actually complex, three-dimensional, traumatized human beings. And Gunn, through the story, he never forgives the behaviors they take. He never forgives like the actions that got him in prison in the first place, but he makes you sympathize with them. He makes you empathize with how they got there. It wasn't because of who they are, it was because the circumstances of their world, of their lives, got them in there. So what's fascinating about James Gunn as a writer-director is that he does so much characterization through all the insane quips, the irreverent jokes, and the gory carnage candy on screen. All of that violence, all of that action serves an actual real purpose for the characters. And not only do you create a great ensemble with actors that play to their strengths, that bring all their personalities onto the screen and make these characters feel like their own unique individuals that are distinct from the actors playing them. You create all these rapports and all these shorthands between characters. Also, in the interest of transparency, this film holds a special place in my heart. Not just because we have a Portuguese actress playing a Portuguese character, but there's a scene that actually takes place in my hometown when we actually dive into Ratcatcher's story. Why that's special is not just because this is a superhero movie in the DC cinematic universe, it's because just with that one scene, this American movie made by American people, by a giant American studio, paid more homage to my roots than 99.9% of actual Portuguese movies. It's just one brief moment, but amidst all the spectacle and all the joy in this film, and finally seeing Harley Quinn get paid respect as a badass character who is also vulnerable, and it's kind of deconstructed through this, there's that morsel of hope that really spoke to me on a personal level. But of course, Man of Steel comes in at number 1, the film that started the DCEU. It's no secret to many of you watching this film that I call it Masterpiece of Steel. Zack Snyder took the classic tale of the man-god Superman and asked the simple yet poignant question, what if God didn't want to be God? And the entire film revolves around that question, where you actually get a sense of the weight of what it is to be a Superman. And you get several different perspectives. You get his birth father, who has entrusted this destiny, this fate of being the savior to the masses onto his son. And you have his adoptive father, who just wants to protect him, who understands that the world is not ready to see his son as he is. And as powerful as he can be, he's also a good person. That's what his father knows. And I'm The hairs on my arm are starting to raise up as I talk about this, just because this film does it all so well. You have all the Zack Snyder action at the end, and it's spectacular. It feels like it's exactly what would happen if Superman came onto Earth. The entire film is that. What if this man god was unleashed on Earth? And so for the most part of this film, you have the thematics, the question, the complex emotions that come with it. It's not an easy question. He recurs to his birth father. He recurs to his adoptive father, to his adoptive mother. He recurs to a priest, a man of faith who actually believes in a god without knowing Superman is sitting right in front of me. The action is bombastic and destructive and big, but it's also very compelling because of all the work the film does up until that point. Not just in its protagonist with Henry Cavill that plays this tortured soul carrying this entire weight of, if I don't do what I'm supposedly destined to do, then what am I? Because I can't just be a person. And so in Man of Steel, Zack Snyder crafts his most emotionally complex and deep movie, whether in the DCEU or just in his filmography in general. He tackled compelling themes with complex characters and doesn't give easy answers. It's a modernized version of Superman. It's a grounded sci-fi first contact type of story, and it brilliantly works with its performances, with its fantastically crafted dialogue. The visuals are awe-inspiring, and this is very much what we would feel like to be Superman and be Superman on day one. He's uncontrollable. He's rough around the edges when using his power. If you mess with his mother, he is going to punch you down to HE double hockey sticks. You do not mess with Superman's mother. This film just means so much to me. It was the film that made me fall in love with the idea, the concept, and what could be accomplished with the Superman story. It doesn't look cynically and simplistically hopeful. It actually tackles the complexities of this insurmountable and immeasurable power through a very human perspective that is flawed, that is uncertain, that is fearful. And Snyder has never dove this deep when it comes to his characters. This is the most profound take on the Man of Steel that I've ever seen. It kicked off the DCEU to a bright start that to me just never met its heights again. And because of all that, it comes in at number 1. And so that is going to do it for my ranking of all 12 DCEU movies. Don't forget to let me know your rankings in the comments below. Share all your thoughts on all 12 DCEU movies. There's a playlist right up here for all my DCEU content. Thank you so much for watching. Big thanks to my channel members for always supporting the channel. And I'll be back very soon for more. So until then, love each other and love the movies.